Next thing you know, you're watching Indian matchmaking and Aparna is on television telling everybody, I hate being an attorney, it's miserable. And you're sitting there like, but why? It looks so great on Law & Order. Welcome back to Wine and Chill, your home for all things millennial adulting. I'm Stephanie, here to talk with you today if whether 4 years and $217,000 later, was law school really worth it? So first thing on the assessment of whether or not law school was worth it, 4 years and a wad of Sallie Mae's cash later is the cost. And what's funny is now that I am 29, 4 years post-grad, barred, all of that jazz, the cost was the last thing on my mind when I was doing my law school applications. I didn't think, oh, I can't apply here because it's expensive. I should apply here. This school's cheaper than that one. Oh, this one gave me a scholarship money versus that. I didn't think about any of that. In full transparency, I don't know if it was a full ride or a 75% scholarship to a lower ranked law school. And I didn't go because all I read was it's about the rank. You have to go to a name brand school so that we can get a good job and do better in your career. In hindsight, I agree with that advice to a certain extent, but I don't agree with the amount of money that I took out because it's completely ridiculous. So if you haven't seen already, I'll link in the cards how I'm paying off my $300,000, $304,000 to be exact, amount of student loans. I borrowed 217 of those $1,000 specifically for law school and another $6,000 for my bar study loan. So let's say 223 law school specific, and then of course interest came and slapped me upside my head. Anyways, so in terms of the cost, I would give this one a complete thumbs down. In terms of the cost, law school is not worth it to me for the price I paid. It's completely ridiculous. I'm now working my butt off to pay off this loan, and it's kind of like I'm in a cycle of craziness. I went to law school to get a good job, to then get a good job, to pay off law school. And it's like, wait, what? What is happening? So I highly suggest you look at the cost. The average private law school here in the US will cost you $60,000 a year. 60,000 times 3, that's $180,000. And this is just tuition. This is not covering your room and board because of course you cannot sleep in the library. Although I'm not gonna lie, sometimes in between classes I did sleep in the library because law school's a rough time. So yeah, your public institutions, your state schools are gonna run you between $35,000 and $40,000 a year. So although that's less, it's not significantly less. It's not like you're going from something super cheap to something super expensive. They're both ridiculously expensive. So keeping that in mind, when you're factoring in the cost, you want to look at your tuition as an investment. Okay, I'm investing myself. The average law school debt is estimated around $150,000. For anecdotal context, the majority of my friends that I polled all borrowed around the 200, and I believe that is because the average law school debt is only factoring in the tuition. It's not factoring what people paid for cost of living. So average, you're gonna borrow between $150,000 to $200,000. So if you view that as your investment into your career, okay, how much are you gonna get out of this? The average attorney salary. Now, the problem with averages, I don't believe in averages. I believe in looking at the mean. So like, what's the middle ground? Because averages can be skewed. If someone makes $1 million and someone makes $1, you know, the average then is gonna come out to $500,000. That's two very, very different things. With that being said, the average attorney salary in the US is $120,000. Okay, that sounds great. But again, that's the average. That's skewing 20-year attorneys, 40-year attorneys, and then fresh out of law school. So when you're looking at careers and you're looking at the career choices that maybe you're gonna make, look at the average salary of somebody that's 1 to 5 years out of law school in the specific career you want. So for example, if you already know that you wanna work in public service and you wanna be a public defender, the average public defender in the US makes $35,000. Your average debt is $150,000. You're not gonna pay off the $150,000 with $30,000. I'm just gonna be honest with you, which is why there's public student loan forgiveness. That also takes 10 years. What if you decide 2 years in that you don't wanna do it? That happens to people. So is it worth it if you're gonna barely make 6 figures to then pay off your 6-figure debt? You also have to live, your cost of living, you're probably in a high cost area. Now with the pandemic, you can work from home, so maybe you can do some geo arbitrage. In terms of your salary to debt ratio, I would vote no. In terms of the cost alone, I would vote no. And if I could have gone back, I would have maybe gone with the school that gave me the scholarship money and then transferred out to a more prestigious school, or to be honest, maybe waited a year and saved my money. But please, 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 before you go to law school, before you even do your applications, look at the cost. Map out how much it's going to cost me over 3 years. How can I make sure this cost is something that I can actually pay off when I graduate? Don't be how I was reading these articles that say, oh, attorneys when they graduate make $180,000 in big law. Yeah, 5% of attorneys make $180,000 in big law. A, I didn't want to work in big law. B, 5%. What if you want to and then you don't get it? So you're stuck here with the salary that can't pay off your student loans. So definitely do the research about the cost. The most important thing, I think, outside of the cost is whether or not you actually want to be an attorney. And this is the number one question that people don't ask themselves. And honestly, at 22 years old, I wish I would have asked myself, not, oh, do I want to go to law school? Some people love school. I love school. I would say I'm pretty good at school. I do well in an academic setting. Do you want to be an attorney? And that question means, do you want to do attorney work with your life? And most people, and I'm going to speak for myself included, don't know what that means. We've watched Law and Order. We've watched How to Get Away with Murder. And we don't get it. Next thing you know, you're watching Indian matchmaking and Aparna is on television telling everybody, I hate being an attorney, it's miserable. And you're sitting there like, but why? It looks so great on Law and Order. Because the day-to-day of being an attorney doesn't look like that. And the number one thing I wish I would have done is I wish I would have interned in some type of legal setting at a law firm, in-house, in a government job or whatnot when I was in college. That's something I didn't do. I worked all of college. At one point I had 3 jobs. Again, I'm really cussing 19-year-old me out because with 3 jobs, how did I graduate with any debt from college? And what the heck did I do with that money? I ate a lot of sushi, I'm gonna be honest. I really did. Anywho, you have to figure out why do you want to be an attorney, and the only way to do that is to figure out what the heck attorneys do and what do they do in real life. Like if you want to be a public defender, for example, then you should try and go sit at the courthouse. It's open to everyone, and then talk to some of the public defenders. Attorneys are chatty Cathys. We love to talk about ourselves. I'm a great listener, but I'm just saying, in general, it's a true generalization. We love to talk. Yeah, they may look kind of grumpy. That's because they work 60 hours a week and they are not getting paid. And they have Sallie Mae calling them, but they love to talk. So I would reach out to people, local attorneys in your area. Definitely try to get an internship through your career counselor so you can see what does the day-to-day look like, and more importantly, what will your day-to-day look like, and is that something that you want? Because your day-to-day is not going to be you arguing motions in court right out of law school. That's not happening. Your day-to-day is not going to be you negotiating 6-figure deals at a tech company right out of law school. That's not happening. That's not how this works. That's honestly and truly not how this works. So you have to see, what does the grunt work look like? Do I like it? Do I like redlining documents? What does redlining mean? That I would say 75% of my day is redlining documents and the other 25% is meeting. I'm very chatty. I love to talk. I love negotiation. Love that 25%. 75% though is me in Word redlining documents. And if you don't know what redlining is, it is this very tedious process where you mark up a document and it can be in any color. I guess it's just something that they've kept with that term. But that's also something I didn't even know existed or was a function on Word when I was in college. And to be honest, I didn't learn about it in law school at all. I learned when I interned during law school and I was like, oh, so this is what I do all day. And I think that's when I actually realized, like, ooh, I don't have to be an attorney forever, right? When I was interning. Like, okay, maybe I'll put 10 years on this and we can try other things. Had I done that in college, maybe I would have taken a different route and been honest with myself. It's also important to realize that generally speaking, 70% of people hate their job. And that's because they go into a job that their parents told them is great. Of course, I'm the daughter of immigrants. Of course, doctor, lawyer, or don't speak to me. Like, it's minimal options. I'm also a human being with my own life decisions, and I wish I would have had the sense to be like, oh, but I don't know if I want to do that. I didn't have that sense. Hence, I'm sitting here talking to you about this. Have the sense. You have to figure out what you want to do so you don't become one of the majority of people that doesn't really like their job because A, they got guilted into it by their family or by society at large. To be honest, yes, people can say lawyers are liars, but whenever you tell someone you're an attorney, they automatically assume A, you're a competent person, B, that you have sense, and C, it has some level of prestige in society. Let's be honest. But is that worth it if you don't really like the work? No, it's not. So you have to figure out if you want to do it and what's your why. Why do you want to do it? And that brings me to a good point. The reason why I'm going to say this is law school is miserable and law school is extremely hard. There are some people that really enjoy law school. There are a lot of people that don't because it's stressful. It's just going to be a stressful 3 years of your life and you can make the best of it, but it's still going to be stressful. One of the things during orientation, one of our professors told us, you need to make a list of your why. Why do you want to do this? When you want to quit, go and look at that list. I started law school in 2013, so that was 7 years ago. I've actually kept my list. It was on my dry erase board. As you can see, it's kind of smudged and I have awful handwriting, but I'm going to read it to you and then we can kind of talk about it because it's very interesting to see what 22-year-old me at that point wanted. So the reason why I want to become a lawyer. I already borrowed the money. That was the number one. To prove to myself I'm smart enough, give a voice to human trafficking victims, make my dad proud. I've wanted this since middle school, money to live comfortably, prestige, have my moment to shine. So those are my 22-year-old reasons. It's interesting to me that the number one was I already signed my name on those papers. So I realized at that point, like there's no going back. And there are people that either fail out or quit law school, not to scare you, but you still owe that money. You still owe that money. You still have to pay Sallie Mae. So at that point, don't get to the point where you start it and you realize like, oh, this isn't for me. Definitely realize that and like do all your research and try and see if you want to be an attorney before then, because that is an awful place to be quite frank. The other one that I think is very interesting is I put on there that I've wanted to be an attorney since middle school. And I have, which is the truth. I went to a magnet high school. My major, you had to pick a major, was legal and criminal justice. So I've been on a law track since I was 14. But why did I want to become an attorney before high school? Like who in my mind, who put that idea in my mind? And to be honest, it was something I realized like society thought was appropriate and my immigrant parents thought were appropriate. And I didn't want to be a doctor because I grew up being like, oh, I want to be a doctor. And then I stepped from the hospital and was like, ooh, scrubs. That's not for me. Have realized now, okay, what would have happened if I had tried other things? If I had allowed myself to see like, hey, there are a bunch of other careers outside of being an attorney. I think like as a young person, or like if you're a parent trying to talk to your child about it, have them look at other careers. Intern A, of course, in high school if they can, or in college in the legal field, but also intern at other places, see like what the heck is corporate life about. There are also a lot of non-corporate jobs that are great that I knew nothing about that I wish I had known about. Art director. I have a good friend that's a product manager. I didn't even know what those two words were in college. I didn't know what those were in high school. I have a friend that does project management, and to be honest, that's a producer, a digital producer. So that's her term, and she works for a retail corporation, and my girl makes 6 figures. So there are a lot of different things to do besides doctor, lawyer, engineer. That's all I'm saying. Maybe it's for you, or maybe you just don't know that there are other things out there. And speaking for myself, I wish I would have known that there were other avenues, just to look at them. The last bucket of whether or not I think law school was worth it, and this kind of goes in hand with the prior point of doing your research to see like what attorneys actually do all day, is the lifestyle / work-life balance of most attorneys is non-existent. And I'm going to be very honest with you, this is something that you see and it's like joked about in shows. Like attorneys have extremely high rates of alcoholism, high rates of drug abuse, because they're stressed. They're stressed, and that's a socially acceptable coping mechanism. Most attorneys, on average, work between 50 to 60 hours a week, and that's light. A lot of my friends that work in big law in New York work 70 to 80 hours a week. Now, remember, if you're on salary, there is no overtime. So there is just this work needs to get done. You are my employee, and you will finish this work. It's not particularly enjoyable to work that many hours, particularly because your brain is going to shut off and you need to have a life. And most people burn out. The average big law associate lasts between 2 and 3 years, and they leave because people are not made to work like that. And it also can be very aggressive, like being an attorney. So I'm an in-house attorney, so I work at a tech company, and the bulk of my job is negotiating software transactions, then advising HR, which I really love, so labor and employment, then privacy issues, so advising on data privacy, things like that. So there are some components of my job which are very collaborative. So when I'm working with HR, very collaborative. Data protection, if it has to do with working with engineering and we're building out our processes, very collaborative. Negotiating deals, although a negotiation works best if collaborative, it is somewhat adversarial because I want something and the other person wants something else. So you're basically kind of like fighting with people all day in a very nice manner. If you work in litigation, you are literally arguing and fighting with people all day. If you Google most ridiculous depositions on Google, I haven't Googled it yet, so I'm curious as to what the search results are, but I'm gonna do it afterwards. You'll see how like a deposition works and the antagonistic nature of you just basically interrogating somebody. So that's something to factor in. Attorneys have very quote unquote low quality of life because you work all these hours, you're in a setting where you're not necessarily, your goal is not to be nice to the other person. Your goal is to use your brain on the other person to get your way. How you get your way is up to you. You can be nice about it. I am trying to be very kind because I don't see the purpose of that. But I've been on calls with people, mind you, we're negotiating software, as in like no one is dying, where the other attorney is literally yelling at me on the phone. To the point where I'm sitting there with my business colleague, and they're looking at me and I'm looking at them like, just let them yell. Just let them yell because that's what they're gonna do. And a lot of people and a lot of attorneys, they get a bad rap that they are like deranged and they're like upset because they are. And I don't think that all these people were this way, but they have nothing else. So they channel their anger because they're angry that they're stuck in a career that they don't want to be in because they owe Sallie Mae. That's my 2 cents about that. So yes, there are some attorneys that are extremely happy, bringing up Indian matchmaking again because I adored that show. Aparna hated her job. She said it on international television that she hated her job and she hated being an attorney. And everybody was like, oh. And then I think his name was Shaker. He loved his job. He loved being an attorney. So there's 2 sides of it. Either you love it or you hate it. I don't think there's a lot of middle ground, to be honest. There's a little bit of middle ground, but wouldn't it be better for you to figure that out before you spend all the money, before you spend 3 years of your life? You know, it's better, instead of feeling like, oh, my life is on a clock, I have to do this, I have to check the box. Take some time to really figure it out, which brings me to my number 1 suggestion that I have realized post law school. Was my friend that loves being an attorney, to be honest, I have a few friends. The majority of them, I'm gonna be honest, hate it, but the majority of people also hate their job, so that makes sense. She loves being an attorney and she took a gap year, and I think that that is a great piece of advice. I'll link in the cards my talk that I had with Desiree. She's lovely. She works for the city. She's super bright. She's a litigator. And she is one of the happiest attorneys that I know. And she took a year between college and law school to figure out what she wanted to do, to see the other avenues and all of that. And that is something I suggest everyone to do, especially if you are more than 70% sure that you want to go to law school. Take the gap year and work in the legal setting. Particularly, I think if you work in a legal setting for an entire year as an adult, you're getting a paycheck as a contract manager, as a paralegal, as whatever legal adjacent non-JD role that you can get. I highly would recommend that. So then you can interact with other attorneys, see if they're happy, do they like their job? You can see if you like it. Are you bored? Are you sitting there all day looking at documents like your eyes glazing over? Because 75% of attorney work is paperwork. Are you okay with that? Do you want to find where the semicolon and the comma are wrong in the document, or is that going to like drive you up a wall? You know, a lot of it is paperwork. It's pushing paper. And then a very, 20-ish% if we're being nice, depending on your job, is actual interaction with other people. Um, so that's definitely something to think about. I highly, highly, highly suggest a working gap year in the legal field. All right, if you haven't already, please go ahead and like this video and subscribe. Let me know in the comments, are you considering law school? Are you currently a 1L, 2L, 3L in law school? I'm happy to help you guys along your journey, because I think, fortunately or unfortunately, the way modern society is structured, work takes up so much of your life. You might as well, be very meticulous and very careful about what you choose to do with your one go around. Figure out if it's something you really love, or if, maybe you just want to wait. Law school will always be there. They are sitting there collecting those checks. So for me, if I think 4 years later and all this money, law school was worth it, I think it depends. Typical attorney answer. Not a yes or a no. I think the cost, definitely, I don't agree with the cost. I wish I would have made a plan about the cost and not taken out more than 100,000, to be honest. It's painful to have to pay all that money back. It is, but I'm slowly doing it one step at a time. So in terms of life though, I try not to have any regrets. So I don't have any regrets about anything. Law school has enabled me to see life and the US in a different way than most people, which is helpful. So definitely it depends, but I do have a lot of reservations and wish I would have taken that gap year. I think maybe life would have been a little different. All right, thank you guys for tuning in, and go ahead and like and subscribe if you haven't already. Oh, and turn on your notifications.